What is it that tastes really, really good? What is it that when you've already had 4 slices, you go for the 5th just because it feels so good? And if you want to energize and attract teenagers, what does it like? Pizza, which is an excellent source of saturated fat. Like other pizza restaurants, Pizza Hut primarily uses mozzarella cheese on its pizzas. 40 grams or 1.4 ounces of saturated fat. The American Heart Association notes that eating foods that contain saturated fats raises the level of cholesterol in your blood. High levels of LDL cholesterol in your blood increase your risk of heart disease and stroke. And according to the American Heart Association, examples of foods with saturated fat are fatty beef, lamb, pork, poultry with skin, beef fat, lard and cream, butter, cheese, and other dairy products made from whole or reduced fat milk. These animal products are popular, most especially cheese. They have a lot of saturated fat, and that saturated fat promotes heart disease and stroke. Cardiovascular disease is the leading global cause of death, accounting for 17.3 million deaths per year. Preventive treatment that reduces CVD by even a small percentage can substantially reduce, nationally and globally, the number of people who develop CVD and the costs of caring for them. This American Heart Association Presidential Advisory on Dietary Fats and CVD reviews and discusses the scientific evidence, including the most recent studies on the effects of dietary saturated fat intake and its replacement by other types of fats and carbohydrates on CVD. In summary, randomized controlled trials that lowered intake of dietary saturated fat and replaced it with polyunsaturated vegetable oil reduced CVD, that's cardiovascular disease, by approximately 30%, similar to the reduction achieved by statin treatment. Prospective observational studies in many populations showed that lower intake of saturated fat, coupled with higher intake of polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats, is associated with lower rates of CVD and of other major causes of death and all-cause mortality. If you'd like to save more than 5 million lives per year without using pharmaceutical drugs with their nasty side effects, reduce the saturated fat intake. We've learned which foods have them, and we've learned how simple it is to replace it with healthy fat in the diet, and you reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease, and really all the other causes of death, this all-cause mortality. Says the American Heart Association in their Dietary Fats and Cardiovascular Disease report. Noting that cheese also increases cancer risk. Epidemiological data showing greater cancer incidence in populations with a higher proportion of fat in the diet has directed attention to the possibility that dietary fat plays a role. Pizza, pretty alarmingly, is the second leading source of calories in the diets of America's children, trailing only grain desserts such as cookies and other carb-laden sweets. On any given day, roughly 20% of all children aged 2 to 11 and adolescents aged 12 to 19 eat pizza. And when they do, they eat a lot of it. On the days children eat pizza, they eat roughly 400 calories worth, according to the study. For teenagers, it's upwards of 600 calories. Pizza is one of the leading sources of saturated fats for children and youth. And if you'd like to reduce your risk of cancer and heart disease, you can stop eating it. There are 1,828 calories in 1 pound of cheddar cheese, and the calorie breakdown is as follows: 74% fat, 1% carbs, 25% protein. 64% of the fat is saturated. So Americans eat more and more. Americans are eating more cheese than ever, consuming over 34 pounds per capita in 2015. And there's no end in sight for our love with this dairy staple. Cheese consumption has been continuously going up for the last 20 years, and it doesn't seem to be stopping, said Leslie Butler, an agriculture and resource economics lecturer at the University of California, Davis. consumption goes up every year. Lots of calories, lots of saturated fat, very popular. 1 pound of fat is equal to about 3,500 calories. That means that if you eat an extra 350 calories of food a day, which is about equal to a large piece of cake or a medium milkshake, you would gain an extra pound about every 10 days, making possible a weight gain of 18 pounds per year. And in the picture there we see a happy cheese eater. This high consumption of cheese has facilitated an awful lot of weight gain, and now more Americans are obese than ever before. The prevalence of obesity was 39.8% and affected about 93.3 million of U.S. adults in 2015 to 2016. Obesity-related conditions include heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and certain types of cancer that are some of the leading causes of preventable premature death. The estimated annual medical cost of obesity in the United States was $147 billion in 2008 US dollars. The medical cost for people who have obesity was $1,429 higher than those of normal weight. The love affair with cheese has made so many people obese, which really increases their risk of so many preventable diseases and makes healthcare so much more expensive, says the CDC. According to the National Institutes of Health, obesity and overweight together are the second leading cause of preventable death in the United States, close behind tobacco use. An estimated 300,000 deaths per year are due to the obesity epidemic, as illustrated in the photo at right. If you're eating a lot of cheese, you could easily become obese and join the 300,000 people per year who die from that. And even if you don't get obese, you can still be clogging up your arteries and increasing your risk of cancer. In 1950, per capita cheese consumption was 7.7 pounds. And in the 1950s, approximately 10% of U.S. adults were classified as obese. Back in the good old days, not that far back in the 1950s, 10% of the population was obese. And they were eating, on average, 7.7 pounds of cheese per year. Nowadays, the percentage of obese people has increased by 4 times, and the cheese consumption has increased by approximately 5 times. As the rate of cheese consumption continues to grow, look for more obesity and more preventable deaths from it. Food addiction involves being addicted to food in the same way as drug addicts are addicted to drugs. People who have food addiction are unable to control their consumption of certain foods. However, people don't just get addicted to any food. Some foods are more likely to cause symptoms of addiction than others. People get into a situation where they know that they're eating too much of a food, but they're just addicted. They have to go back again and again and again. Researchers at the University of Michigan studied addictive-like eating in 518 participants. They used the Yale Food Addiction Scale as a reference. This is the most commonly used tool to assess food addiction. All participants got a list of 35 foods, both processed and unprocessed. They rated how likely they were to experience problems with each of the 35 foods on a scale from 1, not at all addictive, to 7, extremely addictive. In this study, 7 to 10% of participants were diagnosed with full-blown food addiction. What's more, 92% of participants had addictive-like eating behavior towards some foods. They repeatedly had the desire to quit eating them, but were unable to. And here we see a list of those most addictive foods. Pizza's number 1. Chocolate, chips, cookies, ice cream, French fries, cheeseburgers, soda, cake, cheese, bacon, fried chicken. We're talking here about foods which are generally considered to be heart unhealthy, which have a lot of fat and a lot of cheese. Pizza's number 1 in terms of addictive foods. During 1998 to 2011, 90 outbreaks attributed to cheese were reported. 42% were due to cheese made with unpasteurized milk. 49% to cheese made with pasteurized milk. The most common cheese pathogen pairs were unpasteurized queso fresco, or other Mexican-style cheese, and salmonella. And listeria was also popular. Outbreaks caused by cheese made from pasteurized milk occurred most commonly in restaurant, delis, or banquet settings. Lots of outbreaks of disease every year from cheese. It used to be that the advocates of pasteurization would say, a long time ago, maybe in the 1800s, maybe in 1920s, there was a lot of disease in milk and cheese, but now that we have pasteurization on a national scale, that's a thing of the past. But as this study shows, pasteurization is not a protection. In fact, more disease outbreaks come from pasteurized milk products than from raw milk or unpasteurized milk. We note that 44 of the disease outbreaks were associated with pasteurized milk and fewer, 38, with unpasteurized milk. These outbreaks caused, for the pasteurized milk products, 987 illnesses, 61 hospitalizations, and 3 deaths. So yes, cheese is a dangerous, lethal product, which really should have warning labels. No matter if it's pasteurized, nicely packaged in plastic, cheese is dangerous. You want to avoid painful, unnecessary hospitalizations? You want to stay out of the morgue on the business end of things? Avoid cheese. It isn't safe enough. Of these outbreaks, 19 were associated with salmonella. Campylobacter was another cause, brucella, and 5 of the outbreaks were associated with Escherichia coli, or E. coli. Dangerous pathogens, including those associated with bovine excrement or manure. That is to say, when you're eating your cheese, you could easily be eating a little bit of cow waste in the cheese. In this picture, we see a poor cow in a sea of manure, semi-liquid. Very unhygienic conditions for the cattle being used to produce the milk, which is processed into the cheese. So it's not a surprise to find that E. coli is present in cheese. Escherichia coli is a gram-negative, facultatively anaerobic, rod-shaped coliform bacterium of the genus Escherichia that is commonly found in the lower intestine of warm-blooded organisms. Most E. coli strains are harmless, but some serotypes can cause serious food poisoning in their hosts and are occasionally responsible for product recalls due to food contamination. These bacteria live in the lower intestines of animals, people. When the excrement comes out and gets mixed in with the milk, you can easily have an E. coli illness or death resulting from consumption of the cheese. We've learned a little bit about the heart unhealthy aspects of cheese, how it increases cardiovascular disease, causing more than 5 million unnecessary deaths per year. Preventable deaths. We've learned about the role of cheese in promoting obesity, and that is 300,000 preventable deaths per year. And we've learned that cheese is associated with cancer. It isn't safe. So is that little bit of taste, or a lot of taste, really worth all the negatives associated with cheese?